Hello and welcome back to Waveform Science. I'm Jeff Hagan, your host. Today we are at CES 2025 in the Bluetti booth. We're going to take a quick look at the new stuff that they have in the booth because they got a few things here that aren't really quite announced yet. And just as a caveat, of course, because these aren't announced yet, any specs that I discuss today may change prior to release. But let's get right into it and take a look at what they have here. And the standard disclaimer, I am not paid to make solar generator videos. This channel is not monetized. Bluetti does not give me cash in order to make these videos, and Bluetti has no control over the content of the videos themselves, nor do they get to review it before it is released to the general public. I will be marking this video as a sponsored video simply because you can't get into the Consumer Electronics Show unless you're sponsored by a company that has something to do with consumer electronics. As I myself am not in that industry, they sponsored me to get in, hence they got me the badge. I have no idea if they paid money for the badge, probably they had to pay something for it, but whatever it is, I didn't get any cash out of it. First, let's cover what is the Consumer Electronics Show. In short, it is the largest trade show in the consumer electronics industry anywhere in the world. It covers pretty much every convention center in the Las Vegas area, and there are easily 140,000 plus people attending the show, although I don't have exact numbers for this year yet. Bluetti got a relatively primo booth spot where they are basically right next to the entrance of the Las Vegas Convention Center in one of the halls that is right near the main door. So as you can see from the current video, the booth was extremely well attended by a large number of people. The booth was completely jam-packed with solar generators covering the entire floor space, including a few new products we see here. More solar generators on this side. A large LED-based presentation screen here, along with a sitting area. And yes, more solar generators. Notice a theme? They also had a DJ around the front this year, which was pretty good at attracting attention from people just coming over because the gentleman they hired was actually really good. And yes, the mixing equipment here being used by the DJ, including his laptop and the mixing board, was being run off of a solar generator without being plugged into the wall the entire day. Not only was it an effective technical demonstration, it was also a very good way to introduce the premium model of the EP1300 series unit. The best I can tell, the difference between the premium unit and the standard unit is an extra 100 watts on the inverter and a wireless charging pad on top for mobile phones. One of the EP1300 units had the rear casing removed and covered in plexiglass so nobody shocked themselves. Interesting, the first time I've actually seen them display a unit partially disassembled. They also had more and more and more of their products being displayed throughout the entire booth. Interesting side note, pretty much all of these units are live. There were a couple of mock-ups, we'll talk about those in a moment, but pretty much everything here was actual production models that work. That's different from what you see at most other booths. The two Handsfree hiking backpack units were both on display in both sizes, and the first time actually I've seen them both right next to each other. The larger one is quite a bit larger than the smaller one. Some shenanigans were had, in a good way of course, when a couple of the Bluetti sales reps decided to try on, this is by the way the larger backpack, with the attached solar panel, and walk around the convention hall while charging their cell phone. Anyway, let's move on to the new stuff, the first one being the EP1300. This is a head unit that is the same size as the AC300 or AC500 head unit, except this one's got a battery built into it too, even though it's the same size, so they've compacted things quite a bit, meaning it doesn't need an expansion battery to work. It will work on its own. It also has two inverters built in instead of just one. Why two? Because it can do 240 volt split phase in a single unit. Yay! We've been waiting for that one for a while. Why would you want 240 volt split phase in a single unit? Simple, because most houses, when they have an inlet for a generator input, you need something that makes 240 volts to plug into it, and you don't want to hook two solar generators to each other to make the inputs. The unit itself has a 120 240 volt switch on the front of it, a physical switch, Not entirely sure what that does, and nobody was able to explain it to me, so we'll just have to go with that. We'll figure it out later. It has a charging speed switch. It has 4 outlets on the front, 2 connected to each of the inverters, and can connect to either the B300, the B300S, or the B300K battery. That's a verbal confirmation, by the way, so that might not be 100% correct there. We've got the battery connection cable, as is normal. We've got the new style screen, which is great because it's a much better screen than the old touch screens. You can actually read the screen from across the room. I do like touch screens, but in this case, the new screen that's more readable is actually better. Side of the battery itself has a few ports on it. It's got an AC charging port, interestingly a 120 volt charging port, which kind of implies that it can make 240 while charging from 120. Yay, another use case for this thing. It's got a couple of large RV output ports and some kind of a AC in-out port. Not sure what that's used for yet, but we'll probably find it out as time goes on. The opposite side has 2 connectors for solar inputs, by the way, interestingly limited to 60 volts here. And it also has the battery expansion cable port, and also interestingly only 1 cable expansion port on this unit. I don't know how many batteries you can connect to it. Documentation at this point on this unit is extremely light. There is a paralleling box that was visible, the Hub A1, which has both L1430s and L1450 connectors available for outputs. So apparently you can run multiple together. I was able to use my Bluetti app on my phone to connect to it, and we've got a lot of the options that we expect. So first off, the working mode's the same UPS modes that we have documented previously. So nothing new here, but they do work, so there's no problem with them. You can set your chime charging and your SOC charging. It's got an eco mode, only an AC eco mode. Why? Because it doesn't have a DC output on it. There's an expansion box to give it a DC output, but they didn't have it here, so I can't show you that. It has auto sleep for the screen. Child lock, not entirely sure what that does. I guess it locks out the buttons. Under the advanced setting, you can change the charging current and the grid input current. Not sure what the difference between those are, but it's got both. You can change the AC output frequency between 60 Hz and 50 Hz in case you're in Japan. There is a charging station control. I have no idea what that's for. I haven't been documented on any accessories that are charging stations. I guess we will find out as time goes forward. There's phase voltage. You can set it to 208 volts or 240 volts, 208 being highly useful, by the way, for certain industrial applications. System switch recovery lets the unit automatically turn itself back on after the power is restored if the battery goes dead. Grid self-adaption, we already know what that is, and the DC input source, you can set PV or other, similar to many of the other Bluetti units, so no secrets here. There's also a Pro mode menu down at the bottom. That's likely for pre-release purposes, and I didn't see anything interesting in there. And that was a light speed description and overview of the new EP1300 dual inverter 240 volt split phase unit. Next up is the new EP1300 unit, 13,200 watts, also known as 6.6 kilowatts per inverter, if my math is right, and that comes with IB500 batteries at 4,800 watt hours per battery. And I have some confirmation, at least verbal confirmation, that this new inverter should, in theory, be compatible with the current B500 batteries. Slight changes in the batteries. We don't have full specs here, but I can point out a few things that are interesting. The main one being, notice there is now 4 sets of solar inputs on the inverter itself instead of just 2. That's a nice change. And there's the switches on the batteries have switched from the style of circuit breakers to the style of a industrial on-off switch. That's actually a good change, so that you now have matching switches on the batteries as from the head unit. It makes it easier to install. The connectors on the head unit itself, mostly communication cables and DC input output. The EP series has never had any sort of battery in the head unit, so you need to connect to the batteries in order to get any power out of them. These obviously are not hooked up to anything. There's no cables here. It did appear to be a real unit. I kind of poked in there and it looked like there was electronics inside. They just didn't have anything hooked up, so I didn't try to turn it on or mess with it for that extent. But you do see effectively the same switches. It does know how to backfeed power to the grid, just like the EP900 does, but it does have an option in there that you can make it not backfeed. So this actually merges the lines of the EP800 and the EP900, where the 800 couldn't backfeed, the 900 can. This unit now can be configured either way, can do both. So that's a good thing. It simplifies their line, and the bigger inverters are always nice. You can handle more stuff in your house at the same time. The next and last of the 3 new units that were presented here is an entirely new product segment for Bluetti. It is home power backup, but it's kind of different. Originally, they've had a number of hybrid inverter systems where it's got an inverter in it and a battery, basically a bigger solar generator. This is completely different. This one is a AC coupled, meaning it charges off AC power, battery, and that's all it is. If you give it AC power, it will charge. If you cut off the AC power, it will start discharging back into the same line that fed it, which means that your house needs to be islanded. In other words, it needs some sort of other device that is going to disconnect it from the grid when the grid goes down. This is actually a very, very common way to do whole house backup, and many other vendors do their whole house backup in this way, where you have a bunch of different separate components that play together with each other. Here they have one with the cover open, so you can see inside. This one has a couple of dangling wires on the other side, so I did not attempt to turn it on because that would be probably bad. This device has a nice thin profile, similar to other companies that I've seen that like to mount things on the wall. It's got a little bit less than a 6 kilowatt inverter and a little bit more than a 7.6 kilowatt hour battery, again, similar to other devices that I've seen from other companies. There's a number of specs written on a sticker on the side here, the most interesting one being that the enclosure is rated NEMA 4X, which means it has a gasket to protect against water ingress. So it is rated for both indoor and outdoor use. As you can see, this is a different one. They had several of these in the booth. This particular device, being that it is AC coupled, requires an additional component to actually disconnect the house from the grid when the grid goes down in order for this device to safely feed power back to the rest of your house. So that does imply that they have to release yet another device in order to do that, and that's generally something that does what's called islanding. In other words, reducing your house from the part of the grid to its own island. So what would do that? This is a pre-release version of the Bluetti automatic transfer panel, which is what would island your building from the grid in the case of a power outage. This can be installed either to island the entire building or just part of it. Kind of depends on how much battery you have behind it as to whether or not you want to island the entire building or just certain critical circuits. But it can, in theory, support both. And the reason I say in theory is this appears very much to be a mock-up. It's got, enough parts on the outside that we can get an idea, but we don't have a lot of specs here beyond what I can gather by looking at the actual box. You can see there's no posters or graphics around it either. So we don't have a lot here, but we do know that it will do islanding. A few interesting tidbits here. It appears to be using standard, regular, straight out of Home Depot circuit breakers. That's a good thing. I'm hoping that they keep that in the full version because certain other companies have had a lot of difficulty with their circuit breakers. Things that I don't know who's going to stamp it. I am hoping it is US stamped. Certain power companies do not accept international stampings. Bluetti has indicated to me that they are planning on getting these on the list of approved transfer panels for certain power companies that have a list of transfer panels. If you live in an area where you need your panel to be on a list, please email Bluetti to give them the idea that your power company should be early on that list. There is no documentation yet for this device. There's no user manual, so I don't have any specs yet. But it does appear that it's going to work with both the Energy Pro 6K and the EP1200. So it works with both of them. And that's kind of what they've released this time around. So we've got a new, larger unit that is split phase capable in a single box and has a battery built into the head unit, being the same size as the AC300 that doesn't have a battery in it. So that's pretty cool. We've got a whole home unit, hybrid inverter, and we've got an AC coupled battery unit along with an islanding device to keep the house off the grid when necessary. This was about as much detail as I figure I can give you, given the level of information that I have, without going into too much speculation. And I'm sure as time progresses, we're going to get a better idea of what these devices can and cannot do, as we will likely be doing some detailed reviews of some of these at least, as time goes forward, depending on whether or not they're available. So, as always, thank you all for watching. And if you enjoy the videos, like and subscribe, and as long as you guys keep enjoying the videos, I'll keep making these. As I said before, I'm not paid to make these. I took some time off work and came down to CES. This is my vacation time here. So I'm having a lot of fun down here, playing around with solar generators, and I'm hoping you guys are having some fun learning about what's coming out soon. So as always, thank you all.